Kia ora tamariki, what's up? Today we're going to be painting a rainbow skull. First of all, we need to get a bit of heavyweight cartridge paper and paint white gesso on it with vertical brush marks. It's important that you paint it up and down with vertical brush marks. Then you put yellow acrylic ink from the top, running it down with a damp sponge, just nice even strokes backwards and forwards. Don't try and over stroke it. Okay, then we're adding in a bit of warm red, and I just want to blend that in with the yellow, just being very gentle. Just brush the surface backwards and forwards in a horizontal direction. Now I added a little bit of water at this point just to thin that warm red down a bit before I added the magenta, just so that there was a little bit of a damp surface for this ink to slide on. So here I'm just dropping a little of that magenta in, and I just want to gently stroke it backwards and forwards and blend it in with that warm red, because the warm red hasn't dried yet, so it's quite relatively easy to do. And spread that down a bit, and then add in some cyan, which is a cool blue, and then blend that up from the bottom. I think I changed the sponge over here because you don't want to mix these colours together too much, so it might pay to have a couple of clean sponges before you start. Transfer the skull and the skull reflection using graphite transfer paper in the centre of your composition. Now I wanted to mimic a cobalt blue background, so I mixed warm blue with cool blue and a little bit of white. Paint the blue around the whole silhouette of the skull and the reflection. You want this covering of blue to be as even as possible, so you may have to go over certain areas a couple of times to achieve this. Once you've painted the silhouette, and then you want to start adding in the tonal areas on the skull, the cavities of the eyes and the nose, we're going to dry brush this on, so you want to thin down your paint with a reasonable amount of water. You want thin coats, several thin coats, rather than just a lot of thick paint, because otherwise it won't dry brush as successfully. If you keep on adding layers of dry brushing though, it'll start to lift off the layer underneath, so you've really got to do it in a couple of hits. A little bit like you would shade in with a pencil. Now the skull part, we want to start putting straight black into the negative spaces and the cavity of the nose and the eye. So before we thin it down, just put straight black in, and then thin the black paint down with water and dry brush it as though you're using a pencil. Just give it some nice little light tonal coats here and there, just to sort of build up the shape of the skull. Keep squinting at the image of the skull and squinting at your painting so you get the tones right. And a few finishing touches and the job's done. Ka kite tamariki.